Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our first Earth Day event, hopefully the first of many. My name is Laurent Direzo. I'm the outreach and support worker for Migrants, Women, Opportunities for Work, a project of New Communities Partnerships co-funded by the Government of Ireland and the European Social Fund under the Program of Employability, Inclusion and Learning. My WOW, along with a scheme to support national organizations, another project under NCP, also funded by the Government of Ireland on behalf of the Department of Rural and Community Development and run by my colleague Francesco De Salvia, have organized today's information session with the theme of Earth Day. Before we start, please note that this session is being recorded to make it available for those who are not able to join us today. And before I call on my colleague Francesco to tell you about NCP, I would like to share a bit more about my WOW. My WOW aims to explore, support, and overcome the specific barriers that migrant women face in Ireland during their job-seeking journeys. My WOW is designed to empower migrant women to reach their potential, rebuild their confidence, and upgrade their skills through a 4-week employment training. Additionally, we offer equality, diversity, and inclusion training to HR staff, recruiters, and people involved in the hiring processes of companies or organizations so that together we can work to overcome the barriers that migrant women face in accessing employment in Ireland. Also, we offer information sessions such as these, where we cover topics of importance for migrants and their lives in Ireland. If you would like to know more about our programs, please email mywow@newcommunities.ie. The email will be shared in the chat box soon. I will now invite my colleague Francesco to tell you more about NCP.
Hi.
Sorry, Francesco, your mic is not very audible. Trying to fix that. Not really. Try again. No.
No sound at all.
Can hear you very slightly, but it's not clear.
Francesco, it sounds like it's your audio has been picked up by a device that's not directly connected with your computer. It feels like we've got like Atmos or something.
Do you have earphones you want to try?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Please bear with us as Francesco fixes his audio. As we wait for Francesco to come back, I will let you know about the purpose of today's session. Today's session aims to share general information about our planet, the environment in general, and to broaden your understanding of the different social economic issues that are directly related to the climate crisis. And lastly, to also share with you practical and easy ways to lead a more green lifestyle. Despite the many efforts, whether national, corporate, or in the private sector, there is still a lack of zeal in the fight against the climate change. We hope that this session prompts you to seek to understand more about the climate crisis and your impact on it. Francesco, you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Much better. Thank
Is
you.
it much better?
Yes.
It's strange. I'm really sorry about that because I actually had a meeting yesterday. I have no problem with the laptop. Can you hear me better now?
It's okay. That's fine. Yes.
Yes.
Please, you can.
Okay. I'm really sorry about that. Yes. Sorry. So I start from the start. So I am the National Development and Integration Officer. I'm just going to give you literally 2 minutes overview of what NCP is. I'm not going back to history, but basically NCP, we are a national network of community support group, migrant-led community support group and association. We have about 150 members nationally. And we, in our network, we have over 60 different nationalities. Our areas of work are mainly 5. It's basically to provide access to community and welfare services for migrants, child protection, social inclusion and integration, targeted training, such as the MIWOW training, and citizenship, because we have a separate office where we process citizenship applications. And just really to finish, just to give you some numbers about NCP, because we are in the process of publishing our annual report 2021. The Migrant Family Support Service, last year, they have supported 468 clients, and they have provided training to 240 people. MIWOW, with all the different training that they do, they have almost 200 people attending their 3 different trainings. And in terms of citizenship, last year we had processes over 800 citizenship applications. This was just to give you an idea of the type of work that we do. So that will be from me. Thank you all for being here, and looking forward to the webinar. Thank you. I hand it over to Laura. And sorry about the technical problem.
No worries, Francesco. Thank you for introducing NCP to everybody. Now I am delighted to welcome our 3 speakers for today. The first speaker is Niamh Shaw, a space reporter, doctor in science and engineer, and a multidisciplinary artist. Our second speaker for today is Sandrine Dahiro, a PhD candidate at the University of Limerick, focused in contemporary African literature and postcolonial studies. And lastly, Samira Mushimi, an engineer and rural manager by training, and sustainable executive and BWR Mark lead at Business in the Community of Ireland. I am also delighted to welcome our ISL interpreters, Ali Stewart and Mary Morgan. Once more, welcome everyone. I will now kick off the conversation with Niamh Shaw, who is currently at the NASA Kennedy Space Center covering the launch of an ESA astronaut. And Niamh Niamh incorporates her background in science with art to share and educate people with people across the globe about the environment, a new perspective of our planet using space. She is a recipient of many awards and author of Dream Big. Welcome, Niamh. Thank you. And I will now ask all our speakers to take their cameras off. Thank you.
Morning, Laura. Good morning, everybody, and happy Earth Day. This is a very special day for me. It helps me reflect on what I'm doing and some of the choices and decisions that I make in order to do what I do. Travel is a big part of what I do. So I always struggle with, all the planes and everything that I take, but I hope that in the long term, what I'm actually trying to do is trying to make people more aware of the fact that we're on this planet Earth that maybe will have benefits in the long run. So I'm a very visual person. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and just show you a series of images that help me kind of explain to you why Earth Day is important to me. And I hope Laura asked me to speak with you today to kind of think about an easy way to understand when people talk about the climate crisis, what are they actually talking about? And I've spent a lot of time trying to understand that myself. And I've broken it down into kind of a story that helps me understand it. And I hope that maybe it might help you understand it. So I love this picture. I love this picture. This is Earth. And it's blue and white and green and brown. And there's these blobs of land, and there's a lot of sea, and there's sky, which is what the white bits are. And I would love one day to see all that in one eyeful. That's kind of my life's passion, and it sort of drives everything that I do. Like Laura said, this is a picture that I took yesterday. This is me. I'm down in Florida at the moment, so it's currently 11 minutes past 6 a.m. for me. And there is 4 people that are going to a spacecraft that orbits Earth every day. And one of them is a European astronaut, a woman from Italy, called Samantha Cristoforetti. And every time a European astronaut launches off Earth, I try to share that information with as many people as I can, especially people who are connected with Ireland. Why? Because I think it's amazing that we little tiny creatures dare to want to do something like leave our home that gives us everything that we need. So in one way, us as explorers always makes me very proud to be a human. But then us as explorers always reminds me that we tend to think that we are the center of the universe. And it is a very flawed way, I think, of seeing our place on this planet. So yesterday afternoon, I saw this. This is a launch. I don't know if you can hear that or not. This was just a launch that was happening on the lawn just as I was there. And this is a launch by a company called SpaceX. And they're sending satellites up into space for every single part of the world to have Wi-Fi coverage. So I find launches very moving because we dare to do something that we're not supposed to do as creatures of this planet. So the SpaceX mission wants to have a global network of satellites, and that should provide satellite coverage for all countries around the world. So I applaud the effort of it, but I feel sometimes people don't know enough about these things that are happening. So it's always something that drives me to tell as many people as possible about the things that are happening in space. This is the oldest. This is a bunch of the oldest trees in the world. So these are called bristlecone pines, and they're in California. They're 5,000 years old, and we think we're in charge on this planet. This is a bowhead whale. Bowhead whales live for at least 200 years. This is a massive creature that lives in our ocean, and yet we think we are the most superior species on this planet. And that's a piece of plastic beside the bowhead whale, by the way, as well. So this is the only graph I'm going to show you. And to me, it kind of explains humans who think we are in charge of this planet, what they have been doing to our beautiful planet for the last 150 years. So it's basically a graph that's taken time from the year 1850 all the way up to kind of, I think, about 2020. And it's showing you how much the temperature has changed every year, the difference in temperature. So you'll see up until around about 1920, temperatures were sort of all in or around no change. It was kind of, there was no change in temperature over time. And then it's been slowly creeping up. And now we're getting these changes of about 1 to 1.2 degrees. And this is something that you hear a lot about when people talk about the climate agreement and the Paris Agreement and everything. And this is what they're talking about. So from 1850 to 1900, we had this straight line, and now it's all starting to go up. So why is our planet starting to get warm? Okay. I wanted to show you very quickly this graph. This is a graph of a core of ice that was taken in the Arctic, which is the North Pole. And they drill down and they take these huge kind of pipes of ice. And the amazing thing about ice is that every year a new layer of ice kind of gets deposited on top of the existing ice. And each layer of ice tells scientists how much carbon dioxide is in the air. And so if you look at this graph goes back 800,000 years. And you'll see that you get these peaks where, the planet gets warm and then it goes down, and there are the ice ages. So we've had these ice ages all the way through our times. But in the last, if you look at it here, since 1975, there's been this huge spike up that doesn't meet this usual kind of ice age, planet warming up, ice age, planet warming up. And that's because there's this massive increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in our air in the last 50, 60 years. Okay, so there's two things there that I've shown you. They're the only graphs I'm going to show you, I promise. So you're going, what's going on? How come there's a massive spike in carbon dioxide? How come our temperatures are heating up? So I'd like to kind of explain that to you. I'm not going to bother with that one. This is like a clock of every single creature that has lived on our planet, and it goes back like billions of years. And humans are literally, if that's a clock, like a 24-hour clock, or we'll say a 12-hour clock, humans only come into existence in the last kind of second or so of that clock. And you have all these different eras. You have all these people that study history and dinosaurs, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what we're looking at. But humans, last couple of seconds, and yet we think we are in control. So back to this. This is Earth, taken from the moon, and it was taken in 1968 by a bunch of astronauts who were knocking around the moon. They were basically preparing for two people to eventually land on the moon the following summer, two American men, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And they looked out their window. It was Christmas Eve, and they saw this. They saw the Earth basically in half light because the sun was shining down on top of it. And they shared that with the world. And for the first time ever, people on Earth saw what we looked like from outside of Earth. And it kicked off, they say, the whole environmental movement, this whole notion that this planet is vulnerable, that there's no one coming to save us anytime soon, and it's up to us to take care of our planet. And so you have these big environmental movements like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund, all these big associations that we kind of know an awful lot about now. And why did it happen then? Well, it was just a new way of seeing ourselves, really, I think, that we saw ourselves as in this black velvet of space where there's nothing for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, nothing. We have the moon, and then there's Earth. We can't even see the nearest planet when we see the Earth from here. The stars are millions and millions and millions of kilometers away. There's nothing near us, nothing near us. So we kind of forget the distances and the lengths and how far away everything is when we're here on Earth, because we think of everything in relation to our daily lives. Walk to the shop, 2 minutes. Drive to school, 3 minutes. Going to Belfast for the weekend, 2 hours. Going to Galway for the summer, 2 hours. Going to France, it's a 2-hour flight. We think about just getting around our planet, but we rarely think about the bigger picture. And the interesting thing is, and this is why I love space and talking about climate, is for as long as we've have any records of previous civilizations, all civilizations have been very aware of this relationship that we have with other things outside of Earth, even though we couldn't see ourselves. So you had the Incas, which was a tribe in South America, who adored the sun. You have these tablets from different parts of the world, all kind of cataloging the sun or the stars. We had the telescope was invented in the 1600s. And it's thanks to the telescope that we realized that there were other things around us, which we called planets. And also this telescope told us that we weren't the center of the universe. So up until now, the way we told the story of our place in space was that we were in the center and that the sun went around us and the moon and anything else we saw in the night sky. And then once they had a telescope, they went, actually, we're not the center of the universe. We go around the sun. The moon goes around us, but we go around the sun. And there are these other planets, and they also go around the sun. Oh, and that's not all. The sun is just one star of billions of other stars. And we have a tendency as humans to keep telling the story of our place in the universe based on our perspective. And I guess that's what we do. We can't help but make everything related to us. But because of that, we have a tendency to believe that this lovely planet here behind us is our servant, and that, it's always going to be there. Yeah, it will be there if we work in tandem with it. It will be there if we take care of it, but it won't be there if we keep, banging it and thinking that it's just this limitless supply of all these things that we want. So anyway, so this is our place in the universe. This is where we are. When you line up all the planets, and the distances of this are wrong, they're far much further apart. We are the third rock from the sun. I don't know if you remember that comedy show that used to be called Third Rock. We're the third piece of rock from the sun, and that's where we are. And we are there because the sun pulls us towards the center, and these bigger planets like Jupiter and Saturn, they pull us in the opposite direction. So we're in a state of kind of suspended, a tug of war between these two things. And we go around the sun, and all the different planets go around the sun. And so we're all pulling and pushing and pulling and pushing, a little bit like being on a cramped train or something. We're this blob of people that we're all kind of moving together as this train kind of moves along the way. And I guess you can forget that a lot of the time. You can forget that it's dark where I am right now, and it's daylight where you are, because you're basically facing the sun and I'm not. We kind of forget that at the moment down in Australia, or in the southern hemisphere, in the lower parts of Africa and Asia, it's quite cold now. But no, well, it's their summer and they're kind of going into their autumn, and we're in our spring and we're going into our summer. And then that's because of the way that our planet is tilted towards the sun. We just kind of forget these things, that we're part of this system that's all going on outside, or just above us, a couple of 100 kilometers above us. I started my brain started switching on to this when I went here. This is the desert in America, in the state of Utah, and you see this little building down here, this white building down here. I lived there just for 15 days. And I lived there as an experiment with all my kind of space pals, a crew of us. We lived as if we were on Mars. We wanted to conduct a science experiment. So, the purpose of the mission was to conduct these science experiments. But something else happened to me. Something profound happened to me. I started seeing myself on the planet very differently when all the things that we have on this planet were taken away from me. So I'm talking to you now, and there's a limitless supply of oxygen into my lungs. And I mean, it's kind of a given. We go, yeah, of course, Niamh, like you're on Earth, there's oxygen everywhere. Yes, but there's not oxygen on the planet right beside us, which is Mars, which is where we were pretending to be. So every time I went outside, I had to put on this fake spacesuit. And even wearing something that cumbersome, and wearing a kind of a fan that was supposed to keep my screen, my helmet from fogging up, was really uncomfortable to wear. So imagine what it would be like if there were no oxygen. The other thing on Mars, there's no Tesco, there's no Lidl, there's no bus service, there's no phones, there's no Snapchat, there's no Twitter. So you don't have any of the things that make things easy to live here on Earth. And so we had a set supply of water, and we had a set supply of food. And again, that changes the way you kind of live your life. And 15 days was as long. I wasn't there very long. It was just 15 days. But because we had to count how much water we used every day, we had to use this pump for the water to flow through the taps and through the toilet, and to water the plants that we did. I started seeing how little water we need to flush the toilet, how little water I needed to wash my hands. And so the value of water changed for me a huge amount. And the value of food, and that I can just go down to the supermarket anytime and pick up whatever I like. And that I just turn on a tap and the water is just there. We lived in very basic conditions. And then the most important part of it was going outside and wearing this contraption and realizing that I have everything I could possibly want on this planet, everything. And I kind of take it for granted. And so when, after 15 days, this mission was over and I went back to where I lived, I realized I owned all this stuff. Like, you know, I had loads of towels, even though you can only use one towel at a time. I had kind of loads of sheets. I had loads of cushions. I had loads of stuff, basically. I changed the way I kind of used the toilet. I only flushed the toilet for number twos, not for number one. I brushed my teeth differently. I decided to just get rid of all stuff I didn't need because I wanted to remember how connected I felt with the planet when all that stuff was taken away from me, when Lidl and Tesco and the bus and the car and all the day-to-day stuff that makes me feel somehow I'm in charge, I took all that away, and it really changed my own relationship with the planet and how we work together. The planet gives me this oxygen that I'm breathing. The planet gives me this water. It's not mine. I'm borrowing it, you know? And so I kind of gave away all my stuff, and now I live minimally. I have basically 2 suitcases of clothes. I had to move. I'm based in Strasbourg, and I had to move where I lived. And I had my toiletries and I had my clothes, and I think I had a couple of knives from the kitchen. But other than that, I moved very easily across into the other apartment. And I like that feeling that there's no stuff that makes me feel somehow that I'm in charge, you know, because we're not in charge. And as humans, we keep thinking, oh, yes, you know, everything revolves around us. Well, yeah, we're very smart. And what I like about space is it shows me what we can do, how incredible the things that we can do when we work together, propelling somebody off this planet. That's really smart for creatures that are really, really, really tiny. It's really smart. But we're not in charge. So everything I've noticed about space and our planet too has a cycle. It has a beginning, middle, and end, a beginning, middle, and end. And I think what's happened to us on this planet, why those graphs went up, is that we've forgotten that there's always a cycle and consequences to what we do. So let me explain. So people, there's a cycle to life, isn't there? You know, we were young, we were babies, we grew up, we decided to do whatever we wanted with our lives, and you get involved in relationships, and maybe you have children, and then you get older and you retire and your children have children, and eventually you die. And there's this cycle of life, and we're used to it. We used to it. But there's also a cycle to all the gases that are in the air. So we're breathing in at the moment oxygen, and oxygen in the air that's around us is only 20% of what's in it. There's also nitrogen and water vapor. And nitrogen has this cycle of use around our planet. Water has a cycle. So, you know, it's in the oceans or it's in streams. And when it's warm, the top layer of that water evaporates and it rises up into the air. And then when it gets cold up in the air, you get clouds. And when there's too much water in the clouds, it rains and it comes down and it trickles down our mountains. We drink the water, it goes to the water purification center, it comes back into our taps. It's a cycle. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's constantly the same amount of water is being used again and again and again. And when we look at our sun, I told you before, we have seasons. We have spring, we have summer, we have autumn, we have winter. And also, I just want to talk about carbon dioxide also has a cycle. You know, we're supposed to burn a little bit of wood. And when that happens, there's some gas released into the air and it eventually then goes back into the soil. And this is where we kind of went a little bit askew because we discovered something which was fossil fuels, and we kind of messed with our cycle of carbon dioxide, which is fundamentally the reason why we are where we are today. 300 years ago, we knew about the balance of nature. We lived with the land and we understood this cycle that we have with nature. And we've kind of forgotten it. Because we're very smart, we decided that, yeah, do we all have to be out in a field and kind of milling barley? Or do we all have to hand sow? Is there a faster way of doing this? And we discovered that if we had factories, we could make things much, much, much faster and quicker. And there was a demand for stuff, demand for all the stuff that's in my house, all those duvets, all those towels. But the consequence of that is that we had to have machines that could work fast enough in order to provide this power for us to have all our stuff. And the way we could get the most efficient form of faster motors was by burning coal and gas and oil. But when we did that, it was so concentrated in its burning, all this carbon dioxide flew up into the air. And we didn't really think about the cycle. We didn't really think about, we're not really putting that carbon dioxide back where it came from. It's just staying up in the air. So that's kind of what's happened. We've entered into this era where we didn't think about the end of the cycle. That's why we have this slow rise in our temperature, because the air that we breathe is supposed to be made up of oxygen and nitrogen and a little bit of water vapor. But unfortunately, there is too much carbon dioxide in our air. And carbon dioxide is one of those gases that's really good with absorbing heat. And when it absorbs heat, what happens is that the sun shines on us during the day. There's so much carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, it doesn't escape. So it's like wearing a really heavy jacket on a summer's day. The heat of your body has nowhere to escape. And that's why we're heating up. And I guess I'm on a quest to remind people that we're not in charge. You don't see the bowhead whale taking resources from Earth and not putting anything back. You don't see the bristlecone pines walking around Earth and taking everything that they own. They've been around for 5,000 years, and the bowhead whale has been around for 200 years. So we're not in charge, and we really need to think about all the decisions that we make, the clothes that we buy, always making sure that there's an end of life to everything that we do. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to wish you a really good Earth Day. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Neve. Thank you very much for such a nice presentation. I will now introduce our next speaker, Sandrine Daviro. Sandrine is a writer, filmmaker, artist in residence at the Carlo Art Visual, and much more. Through her PhD work, her thesis reads the environmental crisis unfolding in Africa from an Africanist cultural perspective, using theoretical frameworks associated with the field of post-colonial studies. Welcome to the floor, Sandrine. I'm afraid we can't hear you, Sandrine.
Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, apologies for that. So I'm a second year PhD student in the English department here at UL, where I'm looking at the effect of climate change, but on the African continent. And aside from that, I am also an activist where I'm really passionate about minority voices in Ireland, specifically the Black and Irish community, and how they have been contributing to the Irish cultural landscape. So through my activism work, I have set up a literal and cultural magazine called Unapologetic, where again, we're really championing minority and migrant voices, which have been marginalized in the Irish society. And then with that, then I have the artist in residency, where I am just about to start directing a new documentary in Carlo, where we will be looking at the lived experiences of different generations of migrants in Carlo and how they have found Carlo as their new home, but also how they understand Irishness. So just in regards to Earth Day and like why I was invited to this and like how relevant my research is. So with my research, I look at African cultural texts, so through the medium of photography, writing, autobiography, film and art, to really showcase how Africans and Indigenous communities in the global South have been looking at climate change and have been talking about this issue for the last decade, just because whenever we're talking about climate change, there's a noticeable difference and there's a noticeable awareness of how marginalized communities, specifically Black communities, which are ground zero of the ongoing climate crisis, their voices are left out and their lived experiences and how they're bearing the brunt of the ongoing ecological crisis are left out. So it's really, really important when it comes to Earth Day to really highlight and educate people just on these voices and again how they have been talking about climate change for decades and how they'll be able to help us here in the West to contextualize and understand how we can make the planet a better place, but then also how to think about the future. So the main important thing is with my research, I look at the importance of African cultural texts, because African cultural texts that look at the issue of environmental crisis are continuously misunderstood just because they are coming from the continent, and the continent is assumed to have a myriad of issues, whether or not it's war, poverty, and there's a lack of understanding of how they all contribute to climate change, because there's this false concept that only Western scholars can contextualize environmental issues affecting the African continent. So I want to dispute this and showcase how Africans themselves can talk about climate change. And again, when we come to African climate change, it's really important to highlight how African environmentalists are pushing beyond the misconception that climate change is just another pressing issue, and are calling for the need to pay attention to the ongoing climate events slowly destructing the African continent. So again, they're centralizing micro minorities and are centralizing different communities, such as the farming industry, like in places like Kenya, where again, they have been overcoming issues such as drought and are creating new coping strategies and mechanism for, again, a better understanding of how to treat the world, treat the earth, but then also how to coexist within with the planet. So examples of my work that I explore is, so one of the photographers I explore with a Niger Delta photographer called George Osodi, where again, he really captures, he uses photography to capture the ongoing crisis in the region of Niger Delta. But where, as you can see from this picture, it's a very striking picture where you can see like the main protagonist is this man. And again, it's in a striking resemblance because behind him, the world looks like it's on fire. And again, you can see there it's because of the oil pollution, but then when you can see beside the oil pollution, there's the green area. So again, it really showcases that intimate link between destruction and kind of that exotic beauty of the African landscape. So I'm really drawn to photographs like this, where again they explore how the destruction happens. But then when you have photographers like George Osodi, specifically African photographers, when they're talking about climate change, they don't romanticize their subjects or anything like that. They show the harsh realities and bear witness, so then people can be left captivated, yet asking questions. If this is happening in Africa, why are we not talking about it? If climate change is affecting the whole entire world, then why are we not paying attention to people like this man in George Osodi's photograph? Another element I really want to highlight is the importance of the global South experience of climate change. So whether or not this is in Africa or Asia with a lot of indigenous community, so it's misrepresented. So this is whether or not it's an literature, film, anything like that. Whenever it comes to the lived experiences of the global south, there's an assumption that the continent has a myriad of issues, as I had already said. So because it has a myriad of issues, there's this setting that, oh, like Africans are too busy dying to think about the future, which is incorrect and very a racist rhetoric. So again, like I really want to show how they actually do think about the future, and they have been engaging with this, whether or not it's through oral tradition, folk tales, prophecy, that's always existed. And again, when we're having this conversation about the earth and how better to take care of it, why not turn our attention to communities and indigenous people specifically who have been thinking about this? So again, their lived experiences are downplayed because there's an assumption that Africans are used to suffering, and other indigenous communities, whenever it's like forced displacement, again, there's that assumption that they're already used to this, they're already used to their lands being taken off and their natural resources being drained. So it's downplayed. And the last point is how there's a dismissal of African relationship with nature. So again, there's a refusal to look at how Africans and indigenous communities in the global south actually do have a really intimate link with nature and the world, because they understand that how the planet is something that they have to co-share and have to coexist. So they have always lived peacefully with this. But then this relationship, this intimate relationship, was disrupted during periods such as slavery and colonialism, where again, anyone that was seen to be close with nature was seen as a primitive savage, as opposed to understanding the benefit of having a population which is closely interlinked with nature. So with that in mind, then I want to kind of highlight kind of that domino effect of climate change and how that's in Africa. So due to the lack of resources, it causes a disruption of peace in the area, and that all leads to climate change. So again, this is something that is always overlooked, because when we look at the news and whenever we're seeing wars and refugees, there's a disconnect how they could be climate refugees. And again, that all goes back to that lack of resources. There's a lack of resources because there's that global exploitation in different regions of Africa. So let's say even in the Congo, anything like that. So when we're talking about specifically like in World Earth Day, it's really important to understand how climate change has that effect, and again, how it's contributing to lack of resources and that disruption of peace in different areas, because people's lives are being disrupted. So why not pay attention to their lived experiences and how they have they're fighting for these resources in order to make a sustainable living, but then also to ensure that that ancestral landscape is there for future generations. So different examples of how climate issues are affected while contextualizing it with specific African countries. So examples such as drought. So this is visible in Kenya and Malawi. So landslide is visible in Rwanda and Uganda. Forced displacement, that's visible with a lot of different places, but specifically in my research, I looked at Niger, especially due to the uranium issue. Then with floods with South Africa, we've seen that recently in the last 2 weeks, and Mozambique. And then with the oil pollution, it's most relevant in Nigeria, specifically Niger Delta. So one of the main elements of whenever we're talking about climate change and the global south, and again, how we are able to interpret it, it's really understanding how African voices, and specifically voices from the global south, are always missing in the grander scheme when we're talking about climate change. So everyone, if you can look at the picture there in the middle, everyone knows Greta Thunberg. She's kind of like this revolutionary face of climate change. And again, it's great to be aware of someone like that, because climate change, especially in the West, is something that we've really started paying attention to in the last 5 years. But with that in mind, then there's a stark difference with who we're kind of praising to be the face of climate change, because if you can see there with the only Black environmentalist in that picture, her name is Vanessa Nakate. She's a Ugandan activist, and when this picture was actually first taken, when it was published in various magazines, her face was cropped out. So again, even though the editors say that it was an innocent mistake, it really showed how there's like a lack of awareness on how African voices are actually vital when it comes to this. So I really wanted to highlight that, how like African voices are missing in the conversation of climate change in literal and physical terms, such as this picture. So then we move to kind of the tensions that are exposed. So climate change issues in the African continent also exposes other issues such as gender balance. So again, there is, when you have an activist like Vanessa Nakate, she really pushes for women to have their own self-autonomy and voice, especially when leading their conversation of climate change and how it affects their future, and again, how they want to create a better future for the next generation. It also exposes traditional gender roles. So specifically in farming countries such as Malawi, climate change exposes, again, like those traditional roles of how the men are assumed to just be the farmers, because that's something that's from one generation to the next, and how that role and the tensions there are exposed when it comes to climate change. And then again, another issue that it exposes is the tension of the European dream. So because of forced displacement and we have the climate refugees, there's this sense that, oh, the future has already come and gone in the African continent, and the only way that people can escape the climate issue is by coming to places like different places in Europe, but without the understanding of how this European dream becomes shattered, because once there's a climate refugees come into places like Europe, again, they're faced with racism, xenophobia. So again, it really disrupts this view of the European dream and how only the future can be accessed in Europe, because climate change is an issue that's affecting the whole planet. So it's not something that is just going to affect Africa, even though Africa has been disproportionately affected. It's something that, again, it's been discussed. So with my research, I really want to see what changes need to happen. So again, there needs to be a clear education surrounding universal understanding of climate change. So again, there's that importance of understanding how climate change affects everyone, regardless of the geopolitical setting. But again, how we have to understand how climate change affects Africa in a different way and learn from that. So listening to the lived realities of micro minorities who have firsthand experience of bearing witness to climate change, this is really, really important, especially when we're trying to come up with coping strategies and different mechanisms in how to better approach the future of the planet and this doomsday apocalypse element of climate change. So I'm just going to end it with a quote of Vanessa Nakate. So again, the Ugandan activist: people need to understand that the African people have solutions that will change the world. So this is something that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about climate change. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandrine, for your presentation. That was very informational. Thank you again. Next, I will go on to Samira, who is our last but not least speaker. Samira is her work primarily focuses on finding viable market linkages to women's community-based organizations and their local micro-enterprise as a means to combat rural poverty. This was her work back in India. In Ireland, she works with the business and the community to help Irish businesses integrate sustainability into their business strategy and to drive continuous improvement. She's an advocate of conscious consumerism and tries to embed that into her life choices. Welcome, Samira, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for having me, and thank you. It's been such an interesting conversation so far. So let me quickly share my screen. Okay. All right. I have. Can you see my screen all right, or not yet?
Yes, we can.
And is it in the presentation mode? Sorry,
Yes, it looks great. It's in the presentation.
Very good. Thank
Take
you.
your time. Take your time.
Yeah, sorry, because I can't see it in the presentation mode. So
No rush.
No problem. Right, just a minute. I'm very sorry. I think my screen just froze. I am so sorry, people. All right. So, okay. So today I would be talking about being a conscious consumer, and yeah. So as Laura said, I work with business in the community, and business in the community in Ireland is a movement for sustainable change in business. And our purpose is to inspire and enable businesses to bring about a low carbon and a more sustainable and inclusive society where everybody thrives. So we are a community of, we are a membership organization, and we are the leading advisors on sustainability and CSR. And we have about 120 members here. And my role is that of a sustainability executive, where I would be helping companies embed sustainability into their daily activities. And I'm also I am the business working responsibility mark lead, where I help companies continuously help companies go through a continuous improvement in their sustainability. Well, now it's quiz time. So I have a couple of icebreaker questions for you all. I would be asking 4 questions, and then it would be an interactive mode where we'll have the poll and you can answer the questions. So here goes my first question. So Earth Day is the one and only day during the year that you should care about the environment and act to protect it. True or false? Have a think. I will launch my second question and then we'll go for the answers. What is the theme of the Earth Day for 2022? Invest in your family, invest in our livelihood, invest in our planet, or all the above. Think about it. Next, what percentage of food worldwide is never eaten? Is it 10%, 30%, 60%, or 90%? And my last question, what else is wasted when we produce food that nobody eats? Water, fuel, land resources, and all of the above. Can we have the poll now, please? Okay, take a moment, everybody. Just answer the questions and we can see the results in a minute. So just for your benefit again. So Earth Day is the only day during the year that you should care about the environment and protect it. What is the theme for the Earth's Day? How many years does it take for? Oh, okay. You can answer 1, 2, 4, and 5 questions. You can forget about the 4th one, but. Yeah. Okay, Laura, do we have everybody answer the questions? Can you show us the answers?
I only have 1 person who has 2 people who have answered the questions. Do you want to give it another minute or come back to the results after? Okay.
Yeah, we can actually come back to the results afterwards if that's okay.
That'll be fine.
All right. Okay, so, or maybe I'd just give another minute if that's okay.
It is up to you.
Yeah, I'll give another minute. Maybe we could finish this and then move on to the next section. You can just tell me once we have the answers and you can launch the poll. Launch the results, sorry.
want to give it one more minute and then I'll end the poll.
Sure.
A couple of people.
There's no right or wrong questions. I mean, please go ahead and just, we can discuss all the answers in a bit, so don't worry.
Okay, I'm launching the results now.
Sure.
Can you see?
Yes. So the first question, let me take us back to the questions again here. So Earth Day is the one and only day during the year that you should care about the environment and act to protect it. Well, it is. There is somebody who thinks that is true. No, we should make every day an Earth Day, and we should care about the environment and protect it every day. Yes, no. Then what is the theme for the Earth Day? Invest in our planet. That's right. And all the above, that's right as well. So invest in your families, invest in your livelihoods, and invest in your planet. So all the above is right. How many years does it take for a piece of plastic to decompose? Again, all the three answers are right. It takes anywhere from 20 years to 500 years based on the structure of the plastic to decompose. So be aware of how much time it would take for a piece of plastic to decompose when you're using one. Then, what percentage of food worldwide is never eaten? It's about 30 to 50%, and this is that's like half the food that is produced is never eaten, and that's the amount of food waste that we generate. And what else is wasted when we produce food that nobody eats? Fuel is right, water is right, land resources is right. So we waste water, fuel, and land resources when we produce food that nobody eats. Thank you, Laura. So now, in the last couple of days, you might have heard a lot of people talking about the rise in global temperatures and getting net zero by 2020. Already, the world has heated to around 1.1 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. Neve has done a wonderful presentation. She's explained us how the whole temperature rising has happened. So each of the last 4 decades was hotter than any decade ever since 1850. A warmer atmosphere can also hold more moisture, resulting in more extreme rainfalls that causes floods, that causes flood risks. And it also increases evaporation, leading to more intense droughts. An extreme heat event that occurred once per decade in a climate without human influence would happen 4.1 times a decade at 1.5 degrees of warming and 5.6 times at 2 degrees. And this is according to the IPCC climate science panel at the UN. In short, it can lead to an immense imbalance in nature's balance. Loss of plant species and animal species would loss of plant species would double, and that of animal species would triple. And the coral reefs, which are the natural sinks, would further decline, leading to a catastrophic imbalance in the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. And extreme heat would increase, and the rate of glaciers melting would increase, leading to sea level increase as well. So this is all not good news. But at this moment, you might be thinking, just one person, how can my actions make a difference? Or isn't it the responsibility of the government to take action, and it's not me? And somebody might think, these are nice things to say, but it's going to burn a hole in my pocket. And you might just think there are way too many jargons, it's not practical and doesn't fit into my day-to-day life. Or you might even be thinking, I want to make a difference, but I don't know how. I really like this comic strip here, which says, if we wait for the government, it'll be too late. If we act as individuals, it's going to be too little. So if we act as a community, it might be just enough. So and all these thoughts on whatever that's happening, like we should have acted 30 years ago, and it's already late. But now it's the time to act, because we have the technology and the tools to tackle climate change, And when we act as communities, the impact is profound. So you can support your local communal gardens, you can encourage wildflower gardens, you can check with your community libraries and council for local initiatives. There's a great opportunity to volunteer, network, make friends, and even make an impact. Again, going back to my questions, this time we're not having a poll, but you can just put in the chat box. No, we've already done this question, sorry. So which bin would the below go to? One is a pizza box without the pizza, obviously, sorry about that. And then the other one is an empty shampoo bottle. So where do you think these items should go into the bins? The green bin, which is a recycle bin, or the black bin, which is the general waste bin? I'll give you a moment to put in your answers in the chat box. Laura, can you tell me when the answers of I'm not able to see the chat box here, sorry.
No worries. I don't see any answers yet.
Okay. All right. No problem. Okay, I see an answer.
Someone said, yeah. There you go.
Yep. Thank you. I'd give another moment then. Okay, you are right that you're right on the bin selection and that both of them would go to the recycle bin. But what you need to be aware here is that if there is any food left on the pizza box, it cannot be recycled. And if there's any shampoo left onto the onto your shampoo bottle, it cannot be recycled. So little things like cleaning up the pizza box of the cheese and the food that's there, or cleaning up, or just rinsing the shampoo bottle, drying it for a bit before putting into the recycle bin, that would help that would help the bin not to get contaminated, and then it would help the recycling, help in recycling the waste there. Now, well, that moves that now plastic. So we can't live without it, and we cannot live without it. So did you know that only 11% of the plastic cups and 4% of the plastic bags are accepted for recycling? It's down to 1% when it comes to plastic cutlery and plates. It reminds me of similar times back home when we used to have newspapers and banana leaves are used to wrap most of the takeaway foods, and cups are made of mud, and when you need to serve hot beverages. And in India, we mostly eat food with our hands, so we don't really need cutlery there. Anyways, plastic production accounts for a similar share of global oil consumption as the aviation industry, which is about 6%. While it can be argued that plastic is a useful material, the abundance of single-use plastic represents an environmentally insufficient use of resources. So add to the plastic hierarchy. If you can, prevent the use of it. Otherwise, you reuse it, recycle it, recover it, and finally dispose it off. With the prevention of waste being an ideal scenario with the option of reuse, recycle, or recover being considered before disposal. So be more conscious about what can and cannot be recycled. When you recycle these items in the correct manner, and try to avoid contaminating the recycling streams. And so what's next? So I have a little anecdote to share here. So my parents were gifted with a mixer grinder for their wedding, which was still working perfectly with some visits to the repair shop, of course, for about 32 years later when I got married. So when I got married and moved to Ireland, I bought a juicer. This juicer stopped working after a couple of months. But since it was still under warranty, I emailed the customer care and they were very responsive. They sent me a replacement in a week's time and all that's good. But they did not collect the one that wasn't working. But what do I do with the one that I have? I don't have the heart to throw it away into the bin. It would cost me more to get it repaired, and I didn't even know who repairs it. So that is the problem of a linear model, a take, make, use model. This is not going to work. And this brings me to circular economy. Okay. So what is circular economy? A circular economy is a model of production and consumption, which involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling existing materials and products as long as possible. It's about providing an opportunity to keep the components in use as much as possible. It's about reusing the components and repurposing them. Again, this isn't something new. This is what a lot of societies have been doing before mainstream capitalism has crept in. Societies and communities worked with limited resources and they tried their best to keep the resources in the system as long as possible. So we need to move on from the linear model. There is a recycling economy, but moving on to the circular economy model is where it's going to be where we can maximize the amount of resources that we have. And now I want to quickly focus your attention to 5 broad ways of making a difference in your day-to-day life. I'm sure all of you are doing at least 70% of the things I'd be talking in the next 5 minutes. I would only be refocusing your attention to some of these things, and these are easy wins. But most importantly, I urge you to be mindful of your decisions. Read the fine print, read the labels, think for a moment about the product life cycle, and then make your purchases. Like these small changes can really have a big impact. So I would be talking about food waste, home energy, fast fashion, transport, and digital pollution here. So food waste. Ahead of electricity, transport, and residential, the sector which contributes most to Ireland's greenhouse emissions is the agriculture sector. And it's about 32% according to the EPA in 2016. And with the majority of this is caused due to the release of methane gases from livestock. So be more conscious of your diets and particularly your meat intake. Plan your meals, freeze your leftovers, get creative with your menus. Have a shopping list on your smartphone, read the labels, and best before foods have great deals and still always great to consume. So there's this app called Too Good To Go. It's a food-based management app. Participating cafes and restaurants give away food that is good for consumption, but nearing their best before date at a very reasonable price. And you can always get a surprise bag with them. I have a link to it here. You can see it at your leisure. Next, try to shorten your food chain. You can grow your own herb gardens and you can compost scraps. Shop locally, go to your farmer's market, experiment with your diets, and you can always be mindful of segregating your waste and bin it in the right way. Carry a keep cup, carry a reusable water bottle, refuse cutlery for a takeaway if you have your own, and please carry your own cloth bag or a reusable bag. Like we might just think it's 1 cup, but that's what 7 million people are saying, and that's not nice. Moving on, home energy. So Irish homes require about 7% more energy than the EU average and emit 58% more carbon dioxide. This is particularly down to the Irish housing stock. And while new builds typically perform well, these are not built this century. Those that are not built this century are not compatible with the 2030 climate-related goals. The government's 2019 action plan suggested plans to provide grants so as to retrofit about 5 million homes to a B2 energy rating. So did you know that most homes in Ireland have a BER or a building energy rating certificate? A building energy rating is similar to the energy rating label for a household electrical item. The label has a scale of A to G, and A-rated buildings are the most efficient and G are the least. The ESRI suggested that the best value for money in terms of deep retrofitting could be found in attic insulation, cavity wall insulation, and installation of heat controls. Opt in the service of professionals to provide a quote on what energy efficiency measures you can apply to your home to provide you with these P2 ratings if you're living in an old house. Now, switch to LED bulbs and turn them off when not in use. And when purchasing new home equipment, try to ensure that you choose items with an A energy rating and buy Irish where possible. Try to prevent energy waste at home and work by eliminating drafts, closing doors and windows, adjusting the thermostat for thermal comfort and energy efficiency, and just turn off appliances when they're not in use. You can always be efficient with your water and energy use. You can always run a washing machine or a dishwasher when it's full, switch off the taps and showers when not in use. And again, just quoting Neve again, where she's saying, when using the toilet, flush when you use both the flushes, use a small flush, use a big flush. That's going to make a lot of difference. Sorry. And then next, transport. Transports accounts for the largest share of Ireland's energy-related CO2 emissions. Road transport accounts for a vast majority, that is like 95%, with the overall emissions growing faster than in any other sector. Electric vehicles will form a backbone for the government's attempt to slow down this growth. However, they remain a long, costly option, and a long-term solution is to have an individual behavior change. Individuals might consider changing their commuting patterns to have more sustainable options, like take the public transport, walk, cycle, choose an electric car, but definitely ask when the electricity is generated from. Carpooling is also a good option. And yes, do check with your organization and employees on the Bike to Work scheme. Now, fast fashion. While exact figures are not often reported by the government bodies on fast fashion, the fashion industry represents a significant impact of the GHG emissions. In 2015, Forbes estimated that the contribution could be as high as 10%. The industry also incentivizes unsustainable crop management processes. They cause sufficient water pollution issues and is rife with human rights concerns along the supply chain. Many of these issues stem from the sub-industry known as fast fashion, which involves bringing catwalk trends to the high street at low prices, with the clothes being discarded when the new trends come in. So when you buy something, we just see the cost. But what we don't see is the true hidden cost: the carbon emissions, the deforestation, the water pollution, the air pollution, animal welfare, landfills, poor working conditions, workers exploited, inequality, textile waste. I can just go on and on. So a couple of questions to ask oneself when you are going for an impulsive buying. Will I still want this item in 5 years? Will I walk away? If I walk away now, would I be thinking about this in another week? Or, would I buy the same thing if it was at full price? Just think about these things when you buy something new. And you can always buy pre-loved clothes. You can swap clothes. You can, when you're buying firsthand, just make sure that you would use it at least 30 times. More than anything, read the labels before you buy. Even if overconsumption is not sustainable, even if you're buying from sustainable brands, and well, there's no sustainable brands, I would not want to go deep down that rabbit hole now. Upcycle. And so I've worked in a charity shop, and it has, it has opened my eyes to the amount of goods in the secondhand market. The clothes and the furniture that hit the racks are most certainly of very high quality, and they're at less than half the prices. I would definitely buying, I've seen the due diligence that goes into the products that hit the racks. So I would definitely recommend you buying from a charity shop. And if you have the time, do volunteer there. That is definitely a very enriching experience. Now, digital pollution. What is digital pollution, and what are the causes of digital pollution? Digital pollution encompasses 3 elements: manufacturing, practices, and e-waste. Digital pollution is responsible for 3.7% of the carbon dioxide emissions globally, and that's 50% more than air transport, which is 2.4%. Did you know that the mobile phones used in the 1960s were made with just 10 components, while now the smartphones have approximately 54 components in them? Our digital culture is dependent on data centers, servers, undersea optical fiber cables, relay antennas, Wi-Fi boxes, and much more, all of which process very little action you perform online. Each time a search query is performed, the carbon dioxide footprint generated and released into the atmosphere for this action amounts to about 0.9 grams of CO2. And each web page which remains open must continuously connect to the server. This is like a huge area which we are still not considering into our into our heads when we are looking at controlling our emissions. So what can I do? Some of the actions we can all do to reduce our digital carbon footprint. It would include simple things like unsubscribe from the newsletters that you don't read, avoid sending images when possible, use online tools such as WeTransfer when you have to send, or you can use an internal link when you have to send pictures. Save websites frequently used on your favorite tab. Click in the browser history to access for a site URL. Watch videos in low resolution. Think before scrolling down videos on social media. Turn off cameras during meetings and when appropriate. Delete emails and files when appropriate, and avoid duplication of files. These are like really small things, and it's going to have a lot of impact. Not but not the least, your voice counts. Vote with your choice. Give feedback where appropriate. Let the brands and government know that you want more sustainable versions of their products and services. Engage with your local community, because I really like the quote here. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. And what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what is the kind of difference you want to make. These are a couple of resources that you might find interesting. There's one on SEAI on the grants about home energy. Unpost has Green Hub loans and information on that. Refunk Upcycling is another new startup, talks about upcycling your furniture. GoodOnYou.eco, again, this gives a list of the top 5 sustainable brands. Just have a look at the resources and you might just find them interesting. And I want to end this by saying, think, read, and react. But again, David Attenborough said, don't waste electricity, don't waste paper, don't waste food. Live the way you want to live, but just don't waste any of the resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samira. Thank you for that presentation. It was very, very enriching. And thank you to all the other speakers as well for your very valuable input and contribution to the webinar. If anybody has any question, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box with the Q&A to begin. I will see if there are any questions. There aren't any questions from the participants so far, so I will ask Francesco, do you have any question or any input for the speakers?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
There were really 3 brilliant presentations, I have to say. Really not only informative, but I really enjoyed all the slides. It was everything so clear, and even from the technical point of view, it was fantastic. And in terms of, I would bring away 3 things from the 3 inputs myself, very, very briefly. From Nia's presentation, I really like the concept that we are not in charge. So it's a very simple, clear way to put it in order to kind of start thinking maybe in a different way. So that's what I bring away with me. For Sandrina's presentation, what stood out to me is that when she mentioned about all the stereotypes about Africa, that it's, I think it's really an issue, because after decades, these stereotypes are, don't help to change the image of Africa. And for Samira, actually, that was fantastic. I'm gonna use the presentation as a sort of a checklist of things to do, because it's really, I'm actually myself, I'm quite self-aware of the environment, but so I feel very personally close to all the topics that you've covered. And what I bring away, it's basically that it should really be a style of life, because it's not a matter of recycling or, it really should be all around, just real style of life. Get used to do all of these things. So thank you very much. And that would be what I bring away with me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francesco, for sharing. I had a question for you, Neve. I was wondering, because generally speaking, getting people to find interest in the climate crisis can be so hard. And I personally think that having them getting interested in the whole galaxy and the world, and because you do bring us backwards to have a much wider and broader look at the issue. Do you find that there may be some people who are more interested in that perspective or less so? And how do you deal with that? Because at the end of the day, your work and also events like these is to raise awareness, have the
Yeah.
conversation going. So how do you deal with that?
Thanks, Nora. Yeah, it's a great question. I think what I find is, and I was showing you history there about all the different civilizations. Like everybody kind of always looks up to the night sky, so everybody, no matter where you live in the world, sees the same thing. It might see it in different times of the year, whatever. We all see the moon, and we all see stars, and we all see planets up in the night sky. And it kind of unites us no matter where we are on the planet. And I find that when people find out that I'm involved in space, they get really, really interested. And I kind of try to remind them that Earth is in space all the time. So, we just are really lucky that we've been put on a planet where it has everything we could possibly want. And I find that viewpoint and that way in makes people feel a little bit less guilty about it, because I think the climate issue is like, oh no, more school, it sort of feels, and I even did as well. Like I found listening to Greta just scared me. She just scared me. And even David Attenborough, sometimes the Blue Planet, those programs, they just leave me in a state of fear, but without really having my own understanding or my own relationship about like, what does that, I still don't care. I still don't care. It's almost like it's too big. And when I had that experience in the desert, and I realized how water, everywhere we live in Western Europe, particularly, everywhere you live, there's water on tap. So not to have those things is the only way sometimes to actually really understand how to live better. And so I think what's really interesting about this group today is, being associated with the continent of Africa. There are parts of Africa where that is a daily existence, And so a lot of the people on the call today have this unique strength that they can actually describe that to the Western Europe, people in Ireland and stuff, who have no understanding of that. And that actually is a really interesting viewpoint and perspective that you can put on the climate action topic. So I think the people listening in today should really think about, connecting Ireland with the continent of Africa. And if you've seen anything like that, just to kind of remind them, you know what, not everybody has these things, and you know what, we have to take really good care of them, and we all have to work together, because we're in this planet, one species on this planet alone. So I'm always thinking globally, always try to think globally. And I think globally can sometimes help people stop thinking about that the world exists based on their 30-kilometer radius, which we all kind of tend to do, and to think of the bigger picture, that whatever we do, it's like what Samir was saying at the end, fast fashion. Where do those clothes go? They usually end up going to a third world country, and they're somebody else's problem to dump. Where does the plastic go? Where does all the waste go? So I think if we think about this beginning, middle, and end, this circular economy that you're talking about, Samir, which is what I was talking about, this cycle, everything you buy, everything you own, when you're finished with it, where does it go? And to really think about that. And if you have firsthand knowledge of where it ended up, oh my gosh, it's invaluable for your voices to be heard today, and to share pictures and to explain what that feels like to be on the other side of that. You know, I hope that answers your question, Nora.
Yes, it does. And I think maybe we need to talk about space more, because it sounds like people are more interested in that approach.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
I had another question for Samira, if this is not too technical, because on one of the slides you explain how only different percentages of plastic are allowed for recycling. And I did not know that until today. I thought when you put something in the recycling bin that the whole thing is used. So is there a not too technical reason as to why it wouldn't be used? If, let's say, a can or a bottle, why can't it just be used and recycle into something else? That's my question.
So that's a very good question, Laura. Like, depending on the materials, like not every material can be recycled. Like, you have a different, like if you look at single-use plastics, there's like so many different types of plastics, and not all plastics can be recycled at the same way. And again, it comes in so many parts, and the kind of designs that they go through, the prints that they have. So this is like quite complex than what we see, on like even if you're getting, let's say, a piece of cake home in a box, there'll be like 3 layers onto it, and only one of that can be recycled. And again, if that has cream to it, that part cannot be recycled. So it's much more complex than what we know. And even if you imagine, and even if you're like seeing at the recycle instructions, they'll say just that one part that can be recycled and the others cannot.
The lid, usually the film, or so I guess it has to do with the composition of the whole item, and they would have to separate all of it.
And it quite depends on how we put them into the bin as well. So that's why I was trying to re-emphasize that you need to segregate the waste properly, and even
clean it before.
And once it's contaminated, the whole bin, the whole lot is going to get contaminated, and that's unfortunately.
And it's not recycled
anymore.
Does that get
it get dumped?
It just
I am not 100% sure if we have enough facilities in Ireland to clean and recycle. So it is going to be dumped, and that's not good.
It's quite complex, the whole process of that, and the infrastructure for it as well. I think that's another topic for another day.
And I'm still doing my research on trying to find out the energy that goes into recycling the whole process, because that's another big animal there. Like how much energy, like the energy that goes into manufacture and the energy that goes into getting rid of it, that's something totally different there. And I think we need to be very conscious, and like even the way Neve was saying, how much energy and how much resources get into just getting rid of the product. So we need to think of the end life of it that way.
And I think you touched on it a little bit also when you were mentioning about electrical cars and asking how the electricity is generated. I think that's a huge misconception, or just a very nice packaged, green idea of electrical cars, but then what goes on into that whole process.
And in Ireland especially, I think about 80% of our energy needs come from fossil fuels, and having an electric car does not necessarily mean that we are using electricity generated from renewable sources. So it is our responsibility as citizens to demand for more cleaner resources demand the government that we need, like, we've got like such, I mean, okay, today is not so windy, but look at the wind we normally have in Ireland, and there's a lot of scope to have a lot more renewable, wind energy. Okay, solar is not the best, but yeah, we could definitely,
Unfortunately,
yes, like,
solar is not the best.
yeah, but yes, we could definitely demand. The more we demand, we'd get somewhere. If we don't demand, we'd get absolutely nowhere. So that's something we need to do, and that's a responsibility.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone again. Unless anyone has anything else to add, any comments, there are no questions in the Q&A nor in the chat box. Other, yeah. Thank you all. I will end the webinar here. I learned a lot. Thank you all for giving your time. And thank you to the participants also for joining us and listening. You're all very appreciated. And have a good rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you all. It was lovely listening to everybody, and thanks, Laura,
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity
Thank you,
as
Laura.
Happy
well.
Earth Day. Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Happy
Bye.
Earth Day. Happy
Thanks,
Earth Day,
everybody.
everybody. Thank you, Mary, as well,
Bye.
and Ali, our interpreters. Thank you, Francesco, and all the speakers.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Bye.
I see you soon.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.